Good morning, attendees, and welcome back for day 2 of How to Achieve Reach and Influence webinar. This webinar is intended for speakers who are frustrated at struggling to get reach and influence for their important messages. Many speakers hold the misconception that becoming a better speaker is the answer to reach and influence, and in fact, that's a very partial solution. But there are several other skill sets that are available to you and that you certainly need to be aware of and hopefully master some of them in order for you to acquire that reach and influence that you aspire to. So yesterday we had 6 speakers teaching or introducing you to the first 6 skills. Today we have 5, and the first of those 5 is none other than the one and only Baila Lazarus. Here's a few words of introduction about Baila. Baila is a media ninja. She's an award-winning editor, writer, and media coach, and a media instructor at Small Business BC. Her extensive background in journalism includes managing editor of 4 business newspapers, a business commentator on global television, associate producer at CBC Radio, and 20+ years of print, radio, television, and online production. That's what I call a seasoned pro. Baila has been a featured speaker for the BC Communications Forum, Vancouver Island Tourism, SOHO Victoria, the Women's Enterprise Centre Mentor Advisory Forum, and the Magnificent You Summit, amongst others. She lives in Vancouver and runs her own consulting business, providing workshops, webinars, and personal strategy sessions. Attendees, guests, let's use a digital version of clap, 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 clap in order to welcome Baila to lead off Sunday morning with her session titled How to Get Traditional Media Coverage. Welcome, Baila.
Thank you. Thank you. What is a digital clap? I'm not sure. There should be a digital clap on oh, is that what it is? Okay. Can't see people clapping, so. Oh,
Yep.
There we go.
You can see.
I hope that wasn't too long of an introduction for you to get through.
No, not at all. So Baila, why don't you tell us, as a first step, how you would like us to handle questions that we want to pose to you?
So I tend to actually like to poke into the question box as I go. So I usually have, distinctive parts of the presentation. I'll stop maybe every a minute or so and take a look at the questions. We also will try to leave time at the end, so if there's any questions that I didn't get to, I will try to answer them. And failing that, if we run out of time, my email address is on every slide, so feel free to email me if you have any questions on the content from today's presentation.
Lovely, that's very clear. Now, Baila, as a way to kick this off, tell us why your expertise is crucial for speakers who are aspiring to achieve reach and influence.
So one of the things that is the most valuable, I think, today for any person, any kind of entrepreneur, solopreneur, or business person is time. And speakers are trying to juggle so many different activities. The primary thing they should be doing really is getting on stage. You want to be able to book your speaking engagement. But how do people know about you in order to be interested in you to book you on stage? There's 2 options. You can plug away every day through social media, which is what we've kind of been trained to do over the last 5 years or so. And people really sitting down every day planning to build their audience and to build those followers. by pulling in one or two people into their groups or their lists, you know, on a day-to-day basis. But that takes an enormous amount of time. So the key word in today's marketing is leverage. Leveraging other people's work, leveraging other people's following, leveraging other people's audience. That's the way you save your time. So if speakers want the most efficient way to get their name out into the public and to be seen as an expert, the key is going to be to leverage the audience of all the media that's out there. So focusing on television, radio, newspaper articles, getting journalists to interview them as experts, getting onto podcasts as well. Everything I'm going to talk to you about today is going to be appropriate to all that different media. And if it's for any speaker wanting to be seen as an expert in what they're talking about, or if they just want to have a story done about one talk, maybe they have a signature talk, they might not do it again, and they want to have a story done about that talk, being able to reach out to media and have media coverage can get them tens of thousands of followers, as opposed to maybe just a few hundred or 1,000 or 2,000 you might have on your own social media.
Now, I introduced you, but that was a little bit formal. So why don't you tell us in your own words what your experience has been, so that you are now an acclaimed expert in this field of attracting traditional media coverage?
So I guess what you could call me a media rat. I've been one since I was a teenager. I loved watching the news. I loved watching news documentaries. So my head was always in that space. So I went to university to study journalism, and I was actually hired right into CBC television right on graduation, because I was so keen and I knew the industry by then so well, because I had just watched and listened and read so much, that I was essentially just the go-to person when they were looking for somebody to fill a spot. Since then, I worked for CBC television and radio. I've traveled across the country working in different radio outlets, came to Vancouver and moved from radio into print. Most recently, since 2006, I've been working in business media. So I've been working in business in Vancouver. And I started in there doing some proofreading and writing, and over the years became features editor for Business in Vancouver, and eventually managing editor of Business Examiner series. So that's 4 different business papers in British Columbia. On top of that, I was editing a series of magazines that Glacier Media produces that has to do with everything from sustainability to office space design to investments. And in my lifetime, I've covered pretty much every kind of story there is. But the key thing to know is that the person who makes the decision of what story is a good story is eventually the editor at a paper, or the producer at a radio or TV station, publisher of an online magazine, or of course, if it's a podcast, it's a podcast host. Those are the key players you need to address, you need to find, and you need to talk to. So I was one of those key players. For the years that I was sitting behind the editor's desk, I essentially was the one to say, yep, this is a good story, this is not. The buck stopped with me. And so now I can take all that information and what I've learned from my own experience behind the scenes and let people know how it is appropriate to contact media. So I can tell you, I can break down those walls that make it kind of maybe frustrating, or people are intimidated, or they don't know where to start. I can give you all that information because I come from that point of view of sitting behind the editor's desk.
Great, lovely. So that makes you eminently qualified to give us about 30 minutes of basic training, the principles on what we need to do in order to attract the attention of traditional media.
So I am going to start with something that I actually just mentioned earlier, which has to do with leverage. Can you see my numbers? Oops.
I can see your numbers.
Excellent. So this is what I want to show you guys. So this is what we're talking about when it comes to leverage. Understand, people have been leveraging media for decades, but for the most part, a lot of solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, experts, they haven't actually tried it themselves because they don't know that they can do it. They think that they have to go to PR firms in order to leverage this kind of outlet. However, I'm going to show you today just a few ways that you can address that communication issue. And by doing so, access these kinds of numbers. So think about how long it would take you to build an audience of 100,000 readers or 90,000 subscribers to a newsletter or an email letter. I've given you just a few numbers here. I do look at information mostly from North America. So V is Vita Magazine. It's an online magazine that people subscribe to. It covers lifestyle issues, and it has 90,000 people subscribing to their newsletters, and the newsletters basically push them to the website with all the different articles of the day. Business North Carolina, that was for one of my clients in the States, has 100,000 readers. The Maryland Dennis Show, which is also a lifestyle show, is 270,000 viewers. So can you imagine if you were, let's say, somebody talking about, I don't know, relationship issues, okay? I think we have a speaker coming up who's talking about monogamy. Can we really be monogamous? That might be a really great discussion for something like the Maryland Dennis Show. Can you imagine what it would do for you to get 270,000 people listening to you in one go? And then finally, BC Business, that's in British Columbia here, has 300 page views on their website monthly. So we're not just talking about print media. Everybody should understand, if it's in print, it's online. So don't worry about, well, traditional media, how can I, connect it to online? Everybody's online. It's not, la, la, la. Forget about it. Everybody's online these days. When we're accessing any kind of magazine or newspaper or even television, you're doing it the same way. Whether you're sending it to the editor of a publication that is primarily print, or you're sending it to the producer of a show that's online, whichever it is, it's all the same. Communication is the key, and I'm going to get into that in a couple of minutes. Finally, I want to touch on podcasts. Podcasts are very much like radio shows. So you wouldn't call it traditional media, but it is similar to the traditional radio show in the sense that you are being interviewed by a host. So the communication that you're going to use and what you need to know is going to be the same. The way you would reach out to a podcast would be the same as you might reach out to a radio station. And just recent statistics, actually these statistics might even be a few months old. At that point, more than 60 million people were tuning into podcasts. So let's look at this as something that is really essential for anybody who wants to get their name out there. And I have to say, I was a little surprised showing up at an event, I think it might have been yours, Roger, when I asked people how many have taken advantage of podcasts by becoming a guest, and very few people raised their hand. And yet it's the easiest way to get in front of thousands of listeners and targeted listeners, because podcasts have become very niche and allows you to target the people that you want to actually speak. So I'm going to move on here, just give you an example of one of the, how one person managed to leverage all these readers. This is a woman who was coordinating a program called Mentorship BC here. And she basically asked me to give her some strategies. So she hired me to do a couple of sessions with her. As a journalist by training, I am very able to sit down with anybody, interview them, and come out with the best stories that are going to be interesting for different kinds of audiences. You can actually think that you have one story that's the one people want to hear, and in fact, I'll bet you could be a completely different one. Lots of my clients are very surprised because it's very hard if you don't have that journalism background to understand how to take your knowledge and your talk and make sure that you're presenting what the audience of that media outlet wants to see or hear. So this woman came to me, we wrote a few press releases. She sent them to, I think, 5 business outlets. She connected with BC Business Magazine, which I showed you earlier. And in fact, I think it only took about a week before she got a response. This page called DIY Management, it's a feature in every issue. And they did an interview with her, and she ended up getting in front of 100,000 readers. By that one interview, 5 emails. That's it. 5 emails, one time. So the time she spent was maybe 3 hours with me, and then 1 hour, I think, just to polish up. I give templates on how to send out press releases. So she polished up one of the templates for her and then sent them out. So maybe it was a total of 5 hours. How long would it take you to get in front of 100,000 people if you put time into social media? So here's how we work the story checklist. Now this is a key slide. This is why I've got little stars all over it. It's the most important thing that you want to pay attention to. So if you have been distracted while sitting on this webinar, take a moment now and come back so that you can focus on this particular slide if there's nothing else in the whole day that you take away. The story checklist. This is what I've drummed up over my years of expertise. So number 1 is, of course, whatever your expertise is in. That's going to be the most important thing that people are going to look at. What is your expertise in your product or service? And we call that basically the low-hanging fruit. So what that means is it's the first thing people think about. This is what I'm good at. This is my speech. This is what I want people to know about, or this is my expertise. Now, you could also have an expertise about a learned lesson from operations. By that I mean business operations. But this is something I bring to the table that most people don't in PR, because I come from a business media background in addition to all the other things that I've done. So for example, you could be, let's say you are a speaker that deals with issues of sustainability, and you're talking about how people relate to sustainability and how we might change people's mindsets. And for you, you might think this is a lifestyle thing. I want it to go to consumers, consumer magazines. I don't really know anything about business. However, there may be something in your business operations that you learned about that could be relevant in a business publication. So for example, did you learn anything about branding? Have you discovered, are you creating a sustainable product? What did you learn about creating products? Did you hire people? What did you learn about HR? All those make really great stories too, and they're usually forgotten. So this is something I always want people to be aware of. If you are self-employed, or if you run a business, or if you are even, managerial in a business, you will have lessons learned from that business that might make a really good story. Events. So media loves events. One of the things we like about it is because they're very timely. They give us a good reason on why we're doing the story. Sometimes people send us good story ideas, but there's no real reason why we're going to run it now. Like, unless there's an event coming up, we might say, well, we'll just put it on the shelf and, maybe you'll see what happens. And then sometimes they just get forgotten. So if you can connect your story to an event, that gives media a reason to kind of jump on it and move on it. It gives them a deadline. You don't have an event, create one. Any person can create an event in conjunction with a nonprofit. Nonprofits are always looking for people who would love to raise awareness or raise funds from them. We all remember the Ice Bucket challenge, did that get media attention? On and off social media, traditional media, everybody was talking about it. What did it take? One person to come up with an idea that they're going to put ice over the head and raise awareness. Like, that was it. So if you can take your expertise and somehow connect it to something like the Ice Bucket Challenge, you know, take a nonprofit that you're interested in and create either an event or an ongoing activity, media will be drawn to it. They'll really flock to it. Now, is there something new and changing in your field? So I have to say, this is one of the areas that a lot of people also aren't really aware of. And, you know, as media sort of experts, we like to think that we are knowledgeable about everything, and we try to be. You know, I may not know in-depth knowledge about a certain industry, but I usually know a lot about a bunch of different industries, and it's quite surprising when you're looking to connect with an editor how many things they might know. But there are a lot of things that we don't know. So if you can be helpful to the media and tell them about something that is new or changing in your field, they will turn around and say, well, this might be interesting for our audience, because when something is new and changing, that makes it news. Again, we're looking for a reason. Why would media want to run a story about what you're talking about? What is the compelling reason? It could be a really unique point of view. It could be an event coming up. It could be something new. It could be lessons that the audience needs to know. There are all these different aspects that we look for to ensure that our audience gets value. Because you have to remember, we're not here as media to just give you publicity. That's not our reason for existing. Our reason for existing is to give our audience, whether they are viewers or listeners or readers, to give our audience value. So from your point of view, you should be thinking, how do I give that audience value? If I am going to send a story idea or a press release to something like the Marilyn Dennis Show, what do their audience want to see? What is it that they want to see? So one of the things that you need to do is be very familiar with the media outlets that you're going to approach. And of course, now everybody's online. So even if you don't have a television, there's no reason for you not to be able to actually watch pieces of the shows. So take advantage of that. Learn about the media outlet to see what kind of people do they have in it. What kind of audience members do they have? What kind of stories are they running? Do they even have people like me in there? If you can't see a spot for yourself inside a particular magazine or a particular podcast or a particular radio show, then move on to something else. There is a place for everybody in the right media outlet. So going back to step number 4, thinking about the audience members more would be helpful, because then you're thinking like an editor. What is it that you can provide to that media outlet that's going to provide value for their audience? Connecting to a trend. Now, this is perhaps one of the most interesting ways and powerful ways to get media attention. When there's a trend going on, you're going to have people in the media wanting to follow that trend. Sorry, I'm just checking, trying to get my timing up here. Okay. So when media is following a trend, they're looking for new people to talk to about that trend. So let's say we take a look, what's trending now? The keto diet. Keto diet is all the rage. Everybody's getting a keto diet. Everybody's trying to follow this particular regimen. So media is particularly interested, especially if it's a show that might deal with food issues or a magazine that has a food section. They would be interested in following this trend. Well, you know, where does it come from? Why is it so important? How is it different? So it would be interesting if you had a connection, either as somebody who's participating in a keto diet or somebody who has an expertise about a keto diet. You can actually forward that information and connect your expertise from that industry and be able to connect it for the editor to their audience. So a lot of times I tell people, make sure you let the editor know why your information is going to be important to their audience. Let's go on to the next one. Geographic or demographic relevance. So this is really important when you're dealing particularly with age groups. So if anything you have to do connects with Zoomers or Boomers, there's lots of media out there that's focusing on those kinds of stories. As well, if you live in a particular community that might have its own community paper or community news station, those are places that like to do stories on community members. So you might have more of an opportunity to get into that particular media outlet as opposed to if you were trying to go for the big dailies. So keep in mind that there's elements of geography and demographics that come into play that will increase your chances of getting into media. Niche or quirky offering. This is when you're like off the rails doing something or offering something that's just so bizarre everybody has to stop and look at. An example from, I guess it might be a year or so ago, people starting to create protein from insects and put them into protein bars. As well, I think over at the stadium in Seattle, they're serving deep fried crickets and grasshoppers. So this is the kind of thing, when that comes up, media outlets really love to cover it. It's really weird, it's quirky. People are going to stop, no matter what they're doing, if they're watching television or they hear it on the radio or they hear it on a podcast. If somebody's doing a food podcast and they're talking about using insect protein, people will stop and listen. So that's why it makes for a really good story. And finally, with all of these, if you can connect any kind of timely relevance to your story, as I mentioned earlier, it makes it a lot easier for news media to say yes, because it gives us a reason to actually follow up and jump on that story, as opposed to putting it on the shelf. So next question I get all the time. Okay, so I know where I want to be. What am I going to put in an email? I don't know where to start. First off, who are you and what problem do you solve? I want to be clear here. I did not say, why are you doing what you're doing? This is one of the areas where what's your why does not always apply and is often irrelevant until I get to know you better. So you are treating me, the media, like a client. If you were to approach somebody at a meeting and you want to introduce yourself and you know that this client might be somebody you could work with, you would probably start by addressing what are some of the problems you might be able to solve for that client. You don't go into a whole history of why you started your business unless they ask. The first and key elements is, who are you and why should I listen to you? What is the problem that you're solving that's relevant for my news outlet, for my audience? Is it a world issue? Is it a local issue? Are you demonstrating yourself as an expert in the field? What is it that you want me to know? Then you come in with your credibility factors. This is where you're telling me why I should consider you as an expert. So, when I was editor at the features editor at Business Vancouver and the other business papers, I knew that the reputation of our publication relied on putting in the right people. So if I was going to interview somebody or give them the option for a column, then I would have to know that that person is credible. And I would have to get something from them that makes me feel comfortable that they are the expert. So there are a variety of different factors. I've named 3 here. Education, so certainly if you have degrees in a particular field, I'll be interested in talking to you. So at least a bachelor, preferably a master's if you're at a high level of discussion. What kind of experience do you have? For many people who are entrepreneurs, they don't have the degrees, but they have many years of experience. Depending on how many years of experience you have, that could actually replace education. So it could be that you don't have a particular degree in a certain field, but you have a lot of experience that you just, maybe by participating with other people, learning it on the fly, reading books, whatever it was, you taught yourself how to succeed in that field. Testimonials are always great. People who, especially if they're fairly well known, if you could get some, I wouldn't say celebrity testimonials, but maybe just testimonials from bigger clients, that gives you a lot of credibility. What are some of the topics you can speak about? Now, this comes into play in 2 ways. You may want to write a column, an advice column about what you do. So let's say, going back to the idea of the person who's speaking on monogamy, maybe they have a topic, just want to answer the question, are humans naturally monogamous? Here are 5 reasons why the answer is no. And they write a column. It could be like a blog. Just think of a blog. So if you have the idea that you'd like to write that kind of a column for a magazine or newspaper, then it would be very good in the email to give a few different topics that you could write about. So you would be presenting this email saying, I'd like to write a column for your publication. Here are 4 or 5 titles of my columns that might appeal to you. Let me know if you're interested. Simple as that, cold email, somebody you've never heard before, but you know that their publication is right for you. Also, when it comes to broadcast, if somebody's going to interview you, it's not about writing a column anymore, but you do want to give them ideas of the topics that you can speak to. So maybe that dietitian has an understanding of the keto diet, but can also speak to a variety of other things, general weight loss issues, other kinds of trends, where to get food for different diets. So always try to list a few different ways that you could present your information if this is the kind of expert that you are. You have a wide understanding within your field, and you could be interviewed on any of these kinds of topics, and you want to get your name out there so people know who you are. If you only have 1 keynote speech and you're only interested in having people talk about that speech, then you may avoid number 3. You just want to put in exactly what it is that you want to be known for, and this is the expertise that you have, and you'd like to be interviewed with regard to that expertise. Final thing that you should put in an email, I mentioned this earlier, and I actually tell people to write this into the email. Why your audience should care, : and you tell that person who's going to be the recipient, why should their audience care? If you're sending me the idea of a column, let's say how to create a new office morale, how to improve office morale, and you're sending it to me. Well, if I am somebody at a business newspaper, it's kind of no-brainer that office morale would make sense for my audience because it's a business paper. But you could actually send that to a consumer magazine, a lifestyle magazine, but you would need to make it very clear how it relates to the audience that's reading that magazine. So of course it would be for people reading the magazine who work in offices, which would actually be different from the people reading business publications. So you would want to mail certain things out to business publications and other things to consumer. If you remember when I went back to that checklist of 8 items, the first thing at the top was what you know yourself to be an expert in. The second thing that could make for a good story has to do with lessons learned from business. So you can always find 2 different types of media to reach out to. Once you've once you've outlined who you are, the problem you solve, your credibility factors, the topics you can speak to, and why the audience should care, pretty much you're good to go. We don't want to see long essays. This has to be, believe it or not, 150 to 200 words. 150 to 200 words. It's crazy. So it's very short. You don't have a lot of time. If you want to put background about your company, if you feel there's something really relevant, like why you're doing what you're doing, put it lower down. After you've done these 4 and answered these 4 questions, you put in your contact information, and then at the bottom you could say more about me, or more about Baila, more about my company, and then you could put in more information. If we've read this information so far and we're interested, we'll probably go further and read the rest. So now I'd like to introduce you to Barry, one of my clients, and I'll take you through some of the success story here. He had, his expertise was talking about depression. He was a life coach. He was actually putting together a panel. He was speaking on the panel, and he wanted to get publicity for his talk. Now, this was very difficult because his talk was December 29th, which is between Christmas and New Year's. Not a lot of people interested in going out to that at that time of year. Not a lot of people necessarily around even, to be there. And his hope was to get maybe 100 people out to his event. He had several panelists. This was the first time he was doing it in Vancouver. When he came to me, he had already tried reaching out to media using his own style. This was just something he kind of made up. He had done his own subject line, he had done his own content, and he had gotten like a couple of nibbles, but nothing very, nothing really very deep, nothing that gave him a very wide audience, nothing that would give him the kind of influence that he was looking for. So we focused, before he had just spread it all over the media, like done what's called a media broadcast. A lot of people come to me and they're asking me for those lists where you could send it out to like 400 places at once. I can give those to you. I mean, you can find them online. It's not like they're proprietary. But my approach is much more to try and use your expertise to actually focus on the best audiences for you so that you have a higher rate of interest. And that means identifying actually fewer outlets and creating custom emails for each. Now, don't be afraid when I say custom emails for each. A lot of people think like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to write every new email. No. It's essentially one email and you customize the name. That's it. You may have a word or two. You might have to say, I'm interested in your radio show instead of saying I'm interested in your TV show. That's what I mean by customize. So it's a template. We customized for each of the people. We found contacts for each of the people. In fact, he had done his research and he found contact information already, so I didn't have to help him there. We identified 10 media outlets. We reworked the subject line. So the subject line that he had before had to do, it was just a generic subject line. I think it said something like remarkable event coming to Vancouver. So that's too broad. If I'm reading this, it wouldn't catch my eye. It didn't have a date connected to it in the subject line. And it wasn't really compelling for me to open. I didn't know anything about it, and I would probably gloss over it and never get to it. So you have to remember, your subject line is pretty much the only thing that's going to get you opened in the midst of hundreds and hundreds of emails that decision makers receive every day. So that subject line has to be really good. So we changed it to, I think we just said Depression Confessions event, December 29th. Or it was maybe Christmas event about depression, December 29th. It was just it gave more information and it gave a date. And that was really important. Those two together got people's attention. We also restructured the content of the press release. He actually had written a lot in paragraph forms. He had a lot of text. A lot of it was repetitive. People tend to be very repetitive when they don't have the experience writing a press release or the guidance to write a press release. Taking away all the extraneous material made it a lot easier to read, a lot quicker for journalists to read. And we created a follow-up strategy. So this was very interesting. A lot of people just send out an email and then they sit back and wait. And they wait. And they wait. And maybe a week goes by and 2 weeks go by and then they say, okay, media is not interested. No, that's wrong strategy. Media could be interested, but maybe your subject line just didn't attract them. Maybe that day they didn't have enough time to get to all your email. Maybe your email ended up in spam. Guess what? My clients have had emails end up in spam. Have you ever had an email end up in spam? So there's a process to follow up. It's not resending the same email again because it'll just end up being ignored or going in spam. So we went to the pitches that he had already sent before he came to me, and we resent them using my strategy. In the end, this is what we got. CBC Television, our Vancouver. So that's with, if you are local in Vancouver, you'll know the host Gloria Makarenko. CBC Radio picked them up, North by Northwest. It's a province-wide audience, and Roundhouse Radio in Vancouver. So these just pick them up automatically. There he is with another one of my clients, Candice Platter, who deals with addictions. So there's Gloria Makarenko. They were interviewed on CBC on December 21st, so a full week before the event, which was great. As soon as we sent out these emails, they got picked up very quickly because there was a date in the subject line. If you remember, number 8 on our list of 8 important criteria, make it timely. This is also was on the CBC website, so he could take the link to this interview and send it out through all his social media, which he did, to get even more attention. And the result, more than 500 people came to the event or watched the live stream. So that's 5 times the amount of people that he was expecting. So clearly, this made a huge difference for him. Too often, people go one of 2 routes. They go off to a PR company, they get the bad news, it's going to cost you $3,500 a month to start with, and we need to at least have a 3 to 6 month campaign to make it worthwhile. And then they turn around and they walk away with their tail between their legs because they just can't afford it. No way, $3,500 a month as a solopreneur, I don't know anybody who can do that. That's just on one area of marketing. The other area of marketing, path that people go, is they try to reach out to media without any guidance, which is what Barry did. So he started off, let me see if I had, so he started off, he sent out his own information. He was trying to get 100 people out, but he only used his own sense of what a press release should be. And he didn't get a lot of response. So there's something in between doing it just by yourself without guidance or going off to hire somebody from PR. We're going to get to that in a second, and I just want to show you what Barry wrote. It was so great. He emails me and says, I'm no more of an expert than I was before I did the interviews, but suddenly I'm credible. So it brought a level of credibility to him as a speaker that he just didn't have before. And this to me was so essential for what people need as experts, as speakers, to be seen as the credible one, to be seen as the go-to person. If I'm going to get somebody on a panel to talk about depression, you can bet that Barry is going to be the person that I go to. So, as I mentioned earlier, you could go one way or the other. Most people try and do media outreach on their own without any guidance. And like what happened with Barry, they don't get actual responses. And in response to that, I've created essentially a program that will enable people to get guidance on following a system that I've created, so that people like Barry, he actually came into my class, and while it was my class, we worked with him to improve the emails that he was sending out and the contact information. So what I do in my media mastery system, I go through, first off, finding the clarity on your message. What is it exactly that's going to get the most attention? Then we look at story angles specifically that media is going to be interested in. So a lot of people come to me with a lot of different messages. They want to do a bunch of different things and they're not sure which one they should follow up on. We make sure we get the clarity, working number 1 and 2 together. So the clarity on the message and the story angles, what's going to draw media attention. Then you learn about media outlets and contacts. We'll show you how to write your press release and media pitch. We'll follow up with how to do outreach. And following up how to do outreach, and then follow up if once we do the outreach, if we don't get the responses that we want, how do we do follow up to that? So the Media Mastery System is a 6-week online course, and I can also do it in one-to-one strategy sessions. We will identify what your best story is. We'll give you access to pre-written templates so that all you have to do is tweak a few items to make it customized for you. I will be editing all your material. So while I'm with you, working with you, I don't want you to send anything out unless I've seen it first. That's really, really key. We'll give you a membership in a private Facebook group, which will allow you to interact with other people who've gone through the course, who are graduates, who are have sometimes learned the lessons the hard way that you need to learn, and a lot of discussion in there, helping so people can try out subject lines. You can try out different topics. You know, you can even maybe post a few minutes of your talk so people give you an ideas of what might be interesting as a story idea. And you also get unlimited access to any future media mastery groups and courses. So my regular price, I have a 6-week live course. My regular price is $9.97. But for people who are on this summit, from yesterday and today, the price for the course is $6.97. I also give one-to-one, regular price normally $200 an hour. And for people on the summit, it will be $150 an hour. Now, before I ask people to even go and look at a landing page or any other information, it's really important for me to know that we're going to be a good fit. Because I want to make sure that you're not jumping into a course, especially if the product or service you have might be something that won't get any uptake in media. It's very rare, but on a few occasions, I sometimes have to tell people what you're looking for, you just won't be able to achieve because your content is not compelling enough. So in order to find out if we're going to be a good fit, just go to bailalazarus.com/apply. bailalazarus.com/apply, and that will get you to my application page. There's a few questions there, because if you are committed to this, if you're committed to getting in front of those hundreds of thousands of listeners and viewers, or the millions of listeners on podcasts, if you're tired of spending hours and hours and hours every week on social media, when you could probably spend a quarter of that time and reach out to traditional media, if you're finally deciding that the one gap that you haven't filled was this kind of media outreach in your marketing plan, then jump on right away and answer those questions, because I want to make sure that the people who come in and work with me are serious. I don't want people coming in that are going to sit in class and they're like, oh, this is kind of interesting, and then walk away and do nothing about it. So I want to make sure we are a good fit. bailalazarus.com/apply. And then I can tell you about the timing of upcoming courses, or we can discuss what options there are if you want to work one-to-one. So that is it for formal teaching today. I guess I can go back to the stop share, and I'll take a look and just see. Oh, Candace is on. Hey, Candace. It's great to that event. Very, and the thing was wonderful.
Baila,
Yes.
would you comment on a done-for-you program? I'm not sure if you offer that or not, but if people want one, is there somewhere they can go to have somebody take them by, stand in their shoes?
Yeah, so if you are somebody who just wants to hand this all over to somebody else to do your media, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. So as I mentioned earlier, you could go to a PR firm. I can give you a list of people that I know. And I'm not even talking about big PR firms. These are PR specialists, solopreneurs as well, entrepreneurs. All they do is PR, and they may just be one person, an individual, or they could have 2 or 3 and work across Canada or North America. That's will normally start in the $3,000 to $3,500 range. So that's one option. The other option is if you have somebody in mind that could work with you in marketing, if you already have, let's say, somebody doing social media for you, I would say come into the course with them. I will train them the same way as I train other people how to do the media outreach. And then you can just give it all to them to do. So I've had people who are small businesses, they have a marketing person who doesn't have an expertise in this area, and they come in, they learn from me, and then they just go off and do it by themselves. So that's the second option. I really like that option because then you have somebody in your company already familiar with your product or service. The third option would be for me to find somebody for you who can take on what you're doing, maybe at an hourly rate, wage, maybe at a flat rate. That's a lot harder just in terms of the timing, how long it might take me to find somebody who's applicable for you. And then actually there is one more option. You can go into a website. I'm going to have to tell you the website because I didn't have it in my slide. It's called Jeff Golin, JEFFGAULIN, Jeff Golin. They are journalism jobs. You can post an ad looking for somebody to do PR for you. And these are people with journalism and communication experience. So they've worked with editors already. They may even know editors who would be interested in your stories. I think you can post an ad for $100 and it runs for 2 months. So it's very, very reasonable. That's jeffgolin.com. I'll tell you what, I will type it into.
Yeah, if you could type it into the chat, that would be great.
I hope that it's, the whole site is Jeff Golin journalism jobs. I'll double check it. Anyway, if you Google Jeff Golin, it'll just come up like that. It's a unique name, and it's a listing for journalists. And if you post, you'll get responses within a matter of a week or so. It's still up to you to vet that, but that's pretty much a good way to go if you want to just hire somebody for yourself. So I hope that answers the question. That's
a great tip. Now we have a few minutes left. It's we have 7 minutes to the top of the hour. So audience, feel free to pitch in with your questions or post something to the chat if there's a subject you'd like Baila to discuss that she hasn't yet discussed.
And I'll also talk about something else, you know, that I didn't really have time to put it into my my presentation, but there's something that a lot of people overlook, and often even very experienced PR companies. and it's something that you will learn working with me. And that has to do with what's called editorial calendars. So I'm just going to show you one right now if I can. See if I can share that. Do you see that, Roger? Vita calendar?
Yes, editorial calendar, Vita on the top, absolutely.
So, I showed in my first slide, or one of the first slides, I showed Vita magazine. That's a national magazine online. People subscribe to their newsletters. It's got 100,000 subscribers, and they have consumer-oriented, lifestyle-oriented stories. Lots of magazines and smaller newspapers and business publications will have a calendar that looks like this. At the beginning of the year, they show all the special sections that they're coming up with and all the different story ideas that they might be looking for. So in this case, October, they're going to be looking at fall fashion, they're looking at soup recipes, they're looking at festive tips, treats to make. You know what I see here? If you have any connection to fashion or event planning, you could potentially suggest writing an advice column. For November, they're looking at getaways, skincare regimes, outdoor recreation. Are you connected to any of that? This gives you a great access to the editor. So you would write an email, and in the subject line, you would say, October fall fashion story idea, or November skincare story idea. That's all you need. It's all you need. No fancy stuff, no funny, words or anything. You want the editor to know you understand their magazine, you understand the content, you've taken the time to research, and you are presenting information that their audience is going to actually be interested in. This is another one. This comes from a business calendar. Again, you can see this is Business of Vancouver. So on the right-hand side of that yellow box were some of the this year's topics coming from April and May: human resources, small business. If you have any connections to those kinds of stories, it makes it very easy to get into that kind of a content. And I always suggest to people to take a look and see if they can find the content calendars, because that way it makes it very clear if they have information that the audience of that publication is going to be interested in. So this is just for newspapers and magazines, not sometimes radio shows, not often for television, but it gives you a great boost and leg up on getting your material.
Wonderful. Thank you, Baila. So we are needing to wrap up this interview. On behalf of all the attendees, I would like to thank you very, very much for sharing your words of wisdom with us. Could you please put up your contact information slide one last time?
Oops.
Oh, we have, do we have a question?
Okay.
Okay, a quickie answer, Baila, from Terry Barkman. Yeah. Where and how do we find the content calendars?
Two ways you could do about it. You could start with just a Google search. So if I did BC Business content calendar, I would likely come up directly with that link. Business in Vancouver, or even better, Media Kit. So BC Business Media Kit, Vita Magazine Media Kit. The media kit of a publication will have all sorts of information about their audience, as well as that's where they usually have the content or editorial calendar. Try under the advertising button. So go to advertise with us, is often a button at the top. They would have a media kit. Failing all of that, contact the sales or advertising department. If that publication has a media kit, the advertising department would know about it because they're the ones that usually read.
Great, thank you. So your contact information slide?
Oh, I think I've just lost it. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm going to put up, I guess to put up the last one. There, bailalazarus.com/apply.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, everybody else, for being on here.
Wonderful, and thank you, Baila.
Okay.
So now we're going to wrap this interview with Baila up and start preparing for our next expert, who is Patty Morrison. And Patty is going to speak to us on the subject of creating a high-impact appearance. A high-impact appearance. Patty will be on in 15 minutes.